radars that track this in official government documentation, and we even know the direction from which it was now coming. We have military engagement. We fired over 1,400 rounds at this thing, and it still seemed to be unscathed and still seemed to fly over the greater LA area, not once but twice. And we have ample official documentation. It's not a question of did this event happen, the question is what happened. And so, as UFO cases, I like to say they don't get much better than this. But ultimately, each one of us must arrive at our own conclusions with not only this case, but other cases as we investigate them. So 75 years ago, they just recently in February, on the actual date, February 25th, hosted a celebration at the Fort MacArthur Museum. And in fact, each year in celebration of this event, they host a huge event. So if you're ever in California, in the greater LA area, in San Pedro specifically, I recommend you check that out. They host it each year, but this was the big year. This was the 75th year of the event. And so with that, I'd just like to say thank you. I don't know how we're doing on time. I don't have a clock in front of me. Hopefully we didn't go over. How are we doing? 10 minutes?
7 minutes.
7 minutes. Hey, not bad. So I guess we can take, are we set up for questions? Are we going to save those for the panel? Forrest has a microphone up here. He looks like he's ready to share.
I got a mic. We can do this.
Do we have a question? Yes.
First victim.
Oh, perfect.
When this, I might call it a UFO, left and went back over the ocean,
Right.
what kind of speed was it at them? Did it still just float? Or?
They don't reference any speed, unfortunately, on the radar tracking. They simply state it was tracked. They give the azimuth, the direction from which it was coming from, but they don't reference the, how many knots it was moving, unfortunately. We don't have any detailed information. I want to, just like I did with the Farmington research last year, there's still avenues I want to pursue. It's just finding the time and the resources to actually pursue it.
That would make a really big difference.
I agree. But it's interesting it was moving so slow over the greater LA area to where, again, it couldn't have been aircraft as we know
Like
it.
maybe it wanted to test, how much we could do to it. Thank goodness we didn't have nukes done.
I'm just glad we have this information. I'm glad we have this information preserved. I'm glad like Barry Greenwood was able to get all of these documents. It made it a lot easier on myself in collecting this data. Yes?
I'm really surprised that with the detailed investigation you did, that not once did you mention the wind speed or the wind direction, which would be essential in the movement of a aerial phenomenon.
And that's one, again, I work full-time, so I don't do this full-time. I want to go research further the government documents, and the ones that Barry had, he didn't have any wind speed or wind direction. In none of the military reports, which I have downstairs, I'll have you look at, they don't reference wind speed or wind direction. When I went online to look up the historical weather data, it only listed temperatures. There was no wind or precipitation records online. So what I'm going to have to do is actually go to the military archives and try to get that. But I completely agree. If we can determine that this object was moving directly counter to the wind, then we know this was obviously an object of powered flight.
I believe this was about the time that the weather balloons began to be used.
They were launched on a regular basis actually in that area, especially with the anti-aircraft batteries there. But very good point.
I was just wondering, probably don't matter, but did anybody ever actually take a weather balloon up there and see how many seconds it would last?
I believe Ben Hansen did with one of the productions. I haven't seen it, but he was talking to me about it, where they actually did launch a balloon, I think with a flare, and they were just trying to kind of recreate the event. But I haven't, someone else may have seen that episode. I haven't seen it.
I can't imagine it lasted very long. Yeah, I can't imagine it lasted.
I don't know.
5 seconds.
I don't know, but thank you.
I noticed that I believe it was 122 when it was first noticed on the radar.
I believe so, yeah.
And it got, I believe, it was kind of quick coming through there, but I believe it took 15 minutes for it to go from that to the coast.
Yeah, we could do the calculations on that, but there was no direct indicator of speed in the actual government documents, but we could do some basic math
Well, you know
with
where
the
it was.
time.
Yeah, you know where it was.
Absolutely.
And 15 minutes for 100 and something miles is pretty quick.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I
So,
can't see that.
but there's a lot more information, as the other gentleman asked, with regard to wind speed. I would like to research that further.
Well, generally, at that time of day, if I'm correct, the wind would have been blown offshore because the cold air, maybe the other way around. Yeah, the other way around. It would be coming onshore at that time
Yeah.
of day because the cold air.
Regardless, we have huge shifts in the movement of
Yeah.
this object. I mean,
The
whereas-
the cold air from the ocean would have been coming in under the warm air from the land and coming over. So it depends on what altitude it was.
yeah.
But you could kind of figure out what it should have been at least.
And if anybody wants to help me with that weather data, I can always use some help.
Take storms to spot. David, in your research, when did they introduce proximity munitions in the anti-aircraft?
I believe it was later than 42. I'm not a military expert, but
I'm thinking so also.
But some of the ones I talked to, they had those that would detonate on impact, but they also had timed fuses where you could gauge altitude and the time that the shell was being deployed.
And the
to where-
speed of the shell once it leaves the
Exactly.
gun.
Exactly.
Can we tell from the photograph how accurate that was?
The firing?
It appears to be very, very close to the object they're converging on. But on the other hand, that could be optical illusion. It could be far behind.
That's what I said. Like I said, we're looking at a two-dimensional photo, so we truly can't say it's making direct contact. All we can say is it appears to be either on, making contact, or in front of. We really can't definitively establish that. My contention is, with regard to the photo, we have the famous photo. I know somewhere, at least at one point, there had to be more photos of this object being photographed while it was being fired on. I find it very hard to believe that this photographer got out of bed early in the morning, went to a hillside, took one photo, turned around, got in his car, and went home. And I've talked with Ben Hansen about this. I'm sure whoever the photographer was, if it was Ira Goldner, he probably took several photos of this object, and they took the best photo and used it for the newsprint. And it may have been lost to time. We just don't know. We went through all of Ira Goldner's photos and negatives, and that was the only photo that we had. And the LA Times only has the one negative, to my knowledge.
This is just purely anecdotal, but a friend of mine who's deceased now was responsible for training young men in Texas and anti-aircraft men. And one of the things he mentioned was that the munitions, of course, were very precious.
Absolutely.
They didn't, waste it. And so there was very little actual target practice. He said they had at one point, a radio-controlled drone. It was a little air coupe. And